Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anastasia and I'm the owner and founder of VegShe Health and Wellness. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. It's always wonderful to have you here. So today I'm going to be talking about how expensive vegan food is and sort of how it compares to the price of non-vegan food, so meat and dairy specifically. So I want to start by saying that just like with food that isn't vegan, there are premium food items and then there are standard food items, right? So I think your regular grocery store list or your grocery list each week probably doesn't include truffle oil and saffron, right? So I think there's a scale in terms of premium food items and regular food items. I think another thing that's interesting that I didn't know before going vegan is that there are different types of vegans. And what I mean by that is there are vegans who are very health conscious and are whole food plant-based, so they don't eat any processed or refined foods primarily, and they generally avoid oils. And then there are junk food vegans, and I feel like I fall more on that end of the spectrum, and they eat a lot more processed and refined foods. And I think too, the focus is, junk food vegans, I think the joke is that the reason why those people are vegan is because they care about the animals. I think we all care about the animals. We all have different reasons. My point is, I think that there's this perception that all vegans are whole food plant-based, and that's just not the case. So if you're a quote-unquote junk food vegan, you do have a tendency to spend a premium to get your meat alternatives, your cheese alternatives, pretty much all of the alternatives. If you're a whole food plant-based vegan, you're going to eat a lot of just real, true foods from the earth and from nature, and that can actually potentially be more affordable than even just a regular grocery list for an omnivore. So it kind of all depends on what you pick and choose. So that's something to consider. As far as the price of meat and dairy, and I didn't know this again before going vegan, so this was really surprising to me. Meat and dairy is not priced accurately in the United States. So what I mean by that is that meat and dairy, the industry, receives a lot of subsidies from the government that causes the products to be artificially, I guess, deflated in terms of price. So for example, there is and I had to write this down because there's so many numbers, an author of the book Meatonomics, and he's a lawyer. His name is David Simon. So he ran some numbers on this. This is in his book, but he's also written other articles and things like that. In the United States alone, we spend $414 billion, that's a billion with a B, $billion, subsidizing meat and dairy. But the crazy thing is it's $414 billion of taxpayer dollars. So it's our money. And I know it's difficult. We don't always get to have a say in how our tax dollars are used, but $414 billion is used to subsidize meat and dairy to keep those prices artificially low. So another number that I thought was interesting that David Simon calculated. So as of like 2020, he says a Big Mac is $5. I'm gonna have to take his word for it because I don't know. So Big Mac is $5. And if you were to calculate how much it would be without the subsidies, it would actually be a $13 burger. And so I guess the point that I'm making, and you're probably catching on, is that our food is actually the prices are artificially low, and you actually should be paying more for your meat and dairy. There's a lot of costs that go into that, not only the effect it has on the environment, but the processing and the breeding of all of these animals. So I think when people say vegan food is expensive, I don't think that they have a reasonable comparison because they don't know how much their food is actually supposed to cost. Again though, some vegan products are premium and they are more expensive, and I totally get that. So another thing that's really interesting and kind of concerning about the meat and dairy industry is there's a lot of legislation to protect that industry. And so what ends up happening is they are able to a certain extent, break the law and pollute without getting in trouble for it, basically. So they're protected. And there are certain laws, they're called ag-gag laws, that protect any of these companies or just this industry so that you can't film them while they're doing their work. They're protected. They're able to hide, and the government protects them, so they can get away with creating all of this waste and this pollution, potentially in some of these facilities. I mean, other than the obvious cruelty to animals, there's additional cruelty that's happening, and they're protected. And we can't get proof of what's happening and bring it to the law. They're just able to kind of do what they want. Another thing that's interesting, and I hadn't heard of this before, are right to farm laws. And so what the right to farm laws do is it protects these facilities from being sued by their neighbors or by the community. And you might be wondering, why would people want to sue them? Well, a lot of these facilities, and I've talked about this before, and it's also mentioned in my vegan guide that's coming out, but a lot of these animal processing facilities are built in neighborhoods that are generally or primarily low-income people of color. And as we know, that's not an accident. And because of these laws and because of this right to farm law, these companies are able to create extreme air and water pollution that causes people in the communities around them to become ill. And because of their right to farm, people in those communities are not allowed to sue or able to sue or have the power to sue these companies. In addition to that, in most instances, even if they wanted to, most people in these communities couldn't afford to. They also can't afford to move away. So they're trapped in the situation where, again, our government is giving, special privileges to the meat and dairy industry. In the United States alone, I've got another figure for you, so I have it written down. $37 billion worth of environmental damage is caused by the meat and dairy industry. So $37 billion of environmental damage. And so they're causing all this damage. And like I said, because of their right to farm and because of all this legislation, they're protected. So I think for me, one point that it's concerning and stands out to me, and I don't know how you feel about this, and please drop some messages in the comments below. I do want to know what you think about all this information. But I think the thing that bothers me a lot, I mean, all of this bothers me, but especially, is that we live in a country that, our leaders go to these climate summits and they talk all this big talk about how they're concerned about climate change, and we're almost hitting a breaking point with global warming where we aren't going to be able to turn back. There's this point of no return. But they are deliberately funding the meat and dairy industry with $414 billion from taxpayers every year. And so to me, those things just don't add up. Are we concerned about the planet, or do we not give a shit about it? Because you can't do both. You got to pick one, right? So do we actually care, or is profit, king in this situation? So anyway, those are the feelings I have about the cost of food. I think it's important to have this sort of insight. I think we tend to take price tags at face value without really knowing sort of what's behind them and what the true cost of the creation of our food really means. So those are my thoughts on this. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. And again, drop some messages in the comments. I want to have a conversation about this. I want to know what you think about these laws and about this legislation, because it affects all of us. So again, thank you so much, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you here again soon. Take care.